The burning world. The skies were painted in shades of red and black, a fiery apocalypse consuming the alien planet below. Jack Carter gripped the controls of his battered starship, sweat trickling down his forehead. The distress signal had been weak but desperate, a call for help from a world that was dying. Atmosphere unstable. Proceed with caution. The ship's AI warned in its cold, monotone voice. Jack ignored it. He had seen worse in his years as a mercenary. Yet, as the planet came into full view, even he felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Massive eruptions spewed molten fire into the air, and the surface was a sea of destruction. Buildings crumbled, rivers of lava carved through the land, and thick plumes of smoke choked the sky. Who's crazy enough to send a signal from this hellhole? Jack muttered. But he knew the answer. Someone who had no other choice. He piloted the ship through the storm of ash and debris, landing as close as he dared to the source of the signal. The ground shook as he stepped out, the heat pressing against him like an invisible wall. His boots crunched against the charred remains of what was once a bustling city. "All right, Jack. In and out," he told himself, gripping his plasma rifle tightly. The signal came from a collapsed structure ahead, a towering spire that now lay in ruins. Fires danced along its edges, and the air was thick with the stench of burning metal and stone. He moved quickly, his sharp eyes scanning for signs of life. As he reached the rubble, he heard it, a faint, high-pitched cry. His heart skipped a beat. "Someone's alive in there," he whispered. Jack dropped his rifle and began pulling at the debris, ignoring the searing heat that burned his gloves. The cry grew louder, more desperate, and then he saw her, a small figure, barely visible under a pile of rubble. Her skin was a pale, shimmering blue, marked with glowing symbols that flickered weakly. An alien child. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 by human standards. Her large, luminescent eyes blinked at him, filled with fear and exhaustion. "Hang on, kid. I've got you," Jack said, his voice softer now. He worked faster, his muscles straining as he lifted a heavy slab of metal off her. The girl whimpered as he pulled her free, cradling her tiny, fragile body in his arms. She was light, almost weightless, but her glowing symbols pulsed faintly against his chest. It was as if they were alive, responding to his presence. "Who are you?" he asked, though he knew she couldn't understand him. She just stared at him, clutching a small, round object in her hands, a device of some sort, its surface etched with the same glowing symbols. Before he could think further, a deafening roar shook the ground. Jack looked up to see a massive firestorm rolling toward them, consuming everything in its path. "Time to go," he shouted. He sprinted back to his ship, the girl held tightly against him. The ground cracked and split beneath his feet, molten lava spilling through the fractures. The heat was unbearable, and the firestorm was closing in fast. "Hold on, kid," Jack yelled as he leaped onto the ship's ramp, slamming the controls to seal a hatch behind him. The engines roared to life, and the ship lifted off just as the firestorm engulfed the area they had been standing in moments before. Jack collapsed into the pilot's seat, breathing heavily. The girl was still in his arms, trembling but alive. "You're one lucky kid," he said, glancing down at her. But as he looked closer, he noticed something strange. The symbols on her skin were glowing brighter now, pulsing rhythmically. The device in her hands hummed softly, its patterns shifting like a living map. Jack frowned. "What are you, kid?" The girl didn't answer. She simply looked up at him, her eyes filled with something Jack couldn't quite place. Gratitude, fear, and something else. Hope. Before he could process it, the ship's alarms blared. "Incoming threat detected," the AI announced. Jack cursed under his breath. A fleet of scavenger ships appeared on the radar, closing in fast. They must have picked up on the unique energy signature of the girl's glowing symbols. "Looks like we've got company," Jack muttered, strapping himself into the pilot's chair. As he prepared for another fight, one thought lingered in his mind. Who was this girl, and why was she so important? Whatever the answer, Jack knew one thing. Saving her was just the beginning. A mysterious connection. Jack Carter's ship cut through the void of space, leaving behind the burning planet that had nearly swallowed them both. The alien girl lay silently on the medical cot in his cabin, wrapped in a thermal blanket far too big for her small frame. She hadn't spoken a word since he pulled her from the flames, but Jack could feel her eyes following him. He sat at the control panel, hands gripping the steering thrusters as he navigated through an asteroid belt. His eyes kept drifting to the rearview monitor, where the faint glow of the girl's strange symbols pulsed softly. "What's your story, kid?" Jack mumbled, more to himself than to her. The girl tilted her head slightly, those luminous eyes blinking at him. Jack sighed, leaning back in his chair. It wasn't the first time he'd rescued someone during a job gone wrong, but this felt different. His comms crackled to life. "Captain Carter, this is Commander Vren of the Sovereign Salvage Corps. We've detected unusual energy signatures from your sector. Please confirm your cargo." Jack's jaw tightened. "Nothing but wreckage and a lot of bad memories," he replied flatly. A pause. "You were the only ship to respond to the distress call from the planet. Are you sure there's nothing else aboard?" Jack's eyes flicked to the girl. Her glowing skin brightened for a moment, as if she could sense the conversation. "Just me," Jack answered firmly. "And I'm not in the mood for company." The comms fell silent. Jack exhaled slowly, shutting off the connection. "Scavengers," he muttered. "Smell an opportunity from light years away." Behind him, the girl stirred. She sat up, her small fingers tracing the blanket's rough edges. Jack noticed she held the round device even tighter, its surface shimmering like liquid metal. "That thing doesn't leave your hands, does it?" he said, standing up and approaching her. "What is it? Some kind of key?" The girl didn't respond, but her gaze shifted to the circular patterns now glowing faintly across the device's surface. Jack crouched down to her level. "I'm not gonna take it from you, kid. I just want to know why the hell every scavenger in the galaxy is gonna come chasing after us for it." For the first time, the girl opened her mouth, but instead of words, she hummed, a low, soft tune that sent shivers down Jack's spine. The device reacted instantly, expanding into a series of intricate, glowing rings that floated midair between them. Jack stumbled back. "Whoa, what did you?" Before he could finish, the projection shifted, revealing a map. Not just any map, but a star chart. Ancient, complex, and dotted with symbols Jack didn't recognize. At the center was a glowing beacon, pulsating like a heartbeat. Jack's eyes narrowed. "That's not normal." The girl looked at him, her expression unreadable. She pointed at the beacon on the map, then placed her small hand over her heart. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. "Great, I save an alien girl, and now I'm stuck with a cosmic treasure hunt." Suddenly, the ship's alarms blared. The radar flashed red. Several ships were closing in fast. Jack glanced at the sensors. 6 vessels, all bearing scavenger insignias. "Looks like someone didn't buy the nothing aboard line," Jack grumbled, rushing to the pilot's seat. The girl clutched the device tighter, her glowing symbols flickering rapidly. Jack activated the comms again. "Vren, I told you. Hand over the girl, Carter." Commander Vren's voice cut in, sharp and cold. "We tracked her signature. You don't want to make an enemy out of us." Jack's hand hovered over the weapon controls. "You know me, Vren. I don't make enemies unless I plan on keeping them." The scavenger fleet started closing the gap, weapons charging. Jack's engines flared as he punched the thrusters, weaving between asteroids to avoid being locked on. "You're making this harder than it has to be," Vren warned. "She's not just a kid. She's worth more than you can imagine." Jack's knuckles whitened on the controls. "Maybe to you, but to me, she's someone I pulled out of the fire. I don't sell people." The girl clung to the chair beside him, her wide eyes watching as the enemy ships gained ground. Jack grimaced. His ship wasn't built for high-speed chases, and the scavengers knew it. "All right, kid," Jack muttered. "Time for a little risk." He flipped a switch, redirecting power from the shields to the engines. The ship lurched forward, diving into the densest part of the asteroid belt. Jagged rocks tumbled all around them, close enough to scrape the hull. Vren's voice echoed through the comms. "Carter, you're insane. One wrong move." "Yeah, well, I'm not the one chasing a guy into an asteroid field," Jack shot back. As his ship twisted and rolled through the labyrinth of space debris, two of the scavenger vessels clipped asteroids, spiraling out of control. Only 4 remained. Jack smirked. "That's 2 down. Who's next?" But his victory was short-lived. A sudden energy surge spiked on the radar. Jack's eyes darted to the rear cameras. One of the scavenger ships powered up an ion net launcher. "That's not good," Jack muttered. Before he could react, the net fired, spreading across the void like a massive web. Jack tried to veer left, but the edge of the net caught his ship's engine, dragging them to a halt. The ship shuddered violently as systems flickered. "Got you now, Carter." Vren's smug voice crackled over the comms. Jack slammed his fist on the console. "Damn it." As the scavenger ship circled closer, the girl suddenly stood, raising the device in her hands. Her eyes glowed brighter, and the symbols on her skin shimmered intensely. "What are you doing, kid?" A burst of radiant energy erupted from the device, shooting outward in every direction. The ion net disintegrated in an instant, and the scavenger ships spun wildly, their systems temporarily disabled. Jack stared in disbelief. What was that? The girl swayed slightly, exhaustion clear in her expression. Jack steadied her, his mind racing. Vren's voice returned, shaky and angry. "Carter, you're playing with fire. That girl isn't just cargo. She's the key to something much bigger than you realize." Jack glanced at the girl, who met his gaze with quiet determination. "Yeah," Jack said, shutting off the comms. "I'm starting to get that." As the scavengers struggled to recover, Jack accelerated out of the asteroid belt, leaving them behind. "Looks like you're full of surprises, kid," Jack muttered, watching as the girl closed her eyes and leaned against the seat. But deep down, Jack knew this was just the beginning. Whatever secret the girl carried, it was powerful and dangerous. And now, they were both at the center of it. The chase begins. The stars stretched endlessly in every direction, but Jack Carter couldn't enjoy the view. His hands were tight on the controls, eyes flicking between the navigation screen and the faint blinking dots behind him. Those dots were scavenger ships, persistent, dangerous, and getting closer by the minute. "They're not giving up," Jack muttered, adjusting the ship's trajectory. The asteroid belt they had narrowly escaped was far behind, but the scavengers had regrouped quickly. Jack knew why. The alien girl sitting quietly in the co-pilot's seat was more valuable than any cargo he'd ever carried. The girl watched the distant stars through the viewport, her glowing symbols dimming and brightening rhythmically. She hadn't said a word since unleashing that burst of energy, but Jack could sense something had shifted. She wasn't just scared now, she was aware. "You got any more tricks like that, kid?" Jack asked, glancing at her. The girl didn't respond, but the device she held flickered faintly. Jack sighed. "Didn't think so." The proximity alarm blared suddenly, snapping Jack's attention back to the screen. 3 scavenger ships had broken away from the main group and were accelerating fast. "Great," Jack muttered. "They're splitting up. Real clever." He adjusted course, steering toward a nearby nebula. The dense cloud would scramble scanners and give him a chance to lose them, if his ship held together long enough. "Hold on," he said, not expecting a response. The girl gripped the armrest tightly as the ship dove into the swirling blue mist. Inside the nebula, the stars vanished, replaced by a swirling sea of gas and particles. Jack's radar flickered, struggling to maintain a lock on the scavengers. "Come on," Jack whispered, guiding the ship through narrow currents of energy that crackled along the hull. His fingers danced over the controls, cutting engines briefly to glide in silence. For a few moments, everything was calm. Then, beep, beep. Jack cursed. One scavenger ship had stayed on his tail, moving cautiously through the nebula. Their lights flickered in the distance, growing closer. "They're persistent. I'll give him that," Jack muttered. The girl suddenly leaned forward, eyes fixed on the scavenger ship through the viewport. Her glowing skin brightened slightly, and the strange round device in her hands hummed. Jack noticed immediately. "Whoa, wait. Whatever you did last time nearly fried the whole system. Let me handle this." But the girl ignored him. The symbols on her arms pulsed brighter, and for a second, Jack thought he saw faint lines of energy connecting her to the ship's control panel. Okay, that's new. The scavenger vessel locked on, its silhouette cutting through the nebula fog. Jack gritted his teeth, ready to engage the engines, but the girl pressed her small hand against the glass. Without warning, the energy swirling in the nebula shifted, as if responding to her presence. The mist thickened around the scavenger ship, and their lights flickered violently. Sparks shot from their engines, and their thrusters cut out entirely. The scavenger ship spun helplessly, adrift in the cloud. Jack blinked. "You did that." The girl sat back, her symbols dimming once again. She looked at Jack, tilting her head slightly, as if confused by his surprise. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" Jack muttered, nudging the controls to guide them out of the nebula. Not sure if I should be impressed or terrified. As they emerged from the swirling mist, Jack saw that the other scavenger ships were still circling at the nebula's edge, unwilling to risk following. "Guess that's one way to lose him," Jack said, finally allowing himself to breathe. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. The girl stared silently at him for a long moment before finally speaking her first words since they met. "Thank you." Jack nearly dropped his mug. "You can talk." The girl nodded, her voice soft but clear. "I learn from you." Jack stared at her in disbelief. "You've been picking up English this whole time." She tilted her head again. "I listen." Jack exhaled sharply, shaking his head. "Great. Now I'm teaching an alien kid how to talk while running from scavengers. This just keeps getting better." The girl's gaze shifted to the viewport, her expression growing somber. "They won't stop." Jack's humor faded instantly. He knew she was right. Scavengers were relentless. As long as she was aboard his ship, they'd never stop hunting them. "What do they want from you?" Jack asked, his voice quieter now. The girl hesitated before answering. "I hold key to something old, something hidden." Jack narrowed his eyes. "And they think that key leads to a treasure, right?" The girl shook her head. "Not treasure. Power." Jack frowned. He didn't like the sound of that. "Great. A bunch of greedy pirates chasing us for ultimate power. Classic." He leaned back in his chair, glancing at the girl. "Well, you're lucky you ended up with me. I don't plan on letting them get to you." The girl looked at him, her eyes glowing softly. For the first time since he'd rescued her, Jack thought he saw something more in her expression. Trust. "Rest up, kid," Jack said, setting course for a nearby hidden moon. "We'll figure this out. Together." As the ship cruised through the stars, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that the girl's power was only just beginning to reveal itself. And whatever lay ahead, he knew they were heading straight toward it. Secrets of the past. The ship touched down softly on a desolate moon, far from the main trade routes and scavenger hideouts. Jagged rock formations stretched across the horizon, illuminated by the pale light of a distant star. Jack Carter powered down the engines and let out a long breath. For now, they were safe. He leaned back in his chair, listening to the hum of the ship as it cooled. The alien girl sat quietly beside him, her glowing symbols faint under the cabin lights. Since their escape from the nebula, she hadn't said much. Jack could tell she was exhausted. Whatever power she carried, it drained her every time she used it. "You need rest," Jack said, turning to her. "You're not gonna save the galaxy if you pass out on me." The girl didn't respond right away. Her eyes were fixed on the device in her lap. Its surface rippled faintly, shifting like liquid metal beneath her touch. Jack sighed. "Kid, that thing's important, I get it. But you won't figure out whatever secrets it's hiding if you burn yourself out." Finally, she glanced at him. "This moon feels familiar." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Familiar? You've been here before." She shook her head. "Not me. My people." Jack's curiosity piqued. He knew next to nothing about her race, but every clue seemed to point to something ancient, something lost to time. "All right," Jack said, standing up. "Let's take a look around. Maybe we'll find something that'll jog your memory." The girl slid off the chair, clutching the device tightly, as she followed Jack down the ramp. Outside, the air was thin and cold. Jack's breath misted as he scanned the horizon. The terrain was barren, but there was something else, a strange stillness that felt unnatural. "You sure this place is safe?" Jack asked, mostly to himself. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she walked ahead, her bare feet barely disturbing the dust, as if the moon itself recognized her presence. Jack watched closely. The symbols on her arms glowed faintly with each step, pulsing in rhythm with the device. "Yeah, that's not normal," Jack muttered, keeping his rifle slung over his shoulder just in case. They walked for nearly an hour until the girl suddenly stopped. Jack nearly bumped into her. "What is it?" he asked. The girl knelt down, brushing aside the dust with her small hands. Beneath the surface was something metallic, smooth, untouched by time. Jack crouched beside her, running his hand across it. "A hatch," Jack guessed, tapping it lightly. The sound echoed faintly. "This moon's supposed to be dead. What are we looking at?" The girl pressed the device against the metal surface. The symbols across her skin brightened instantly, and with a soft hum, the ground beneath them began to shift. The hatch slowly slid open, revealing a staircase leading into darkness. Jack frowned. "I was joking about the whole secret treasure thing, but this is getting a little too real." The girl stood silently at the top of the stairs, her expression calm. Jack hesitated, then activated the light on his rifle and stepped forward. The stairs led them deep beneath the surface, the temperature dropping with each step. At the bottom, they entered a vast chamber, ancient and forgotten. Walls lined with strange carvings stretched in every direction, and at the far end of the room stood a towering archway. Jack's footsteps echoed through the silence. He approached the archway, inspecting the symbols etched into the stone. The girl followed closely, holding the device in both hands. "What is this place?" Jack whispered. The girl stepped forward, touching the archway gently. "A sanctuary," she said softly. "My people built these places long ago, to hide from those who sought to destroy us." Jack's eyes narrowed. "Hide? From who?" She looked up at him, her expression somber. "Not who. What?" Before Jack could press further, the archway responded to her touch. A ripple of light cascaded across the chamber, and a faint projection emerged. An ancient hologram of a tall, regal figure. The alien's form was draped in ceremonial robes, their eyes glowing like the girl's. The figure's voice echoed through the chamber. "To those who stand before this gate, know that our time has passed, but our knowledge endures. The child you protect carries the last fragment of our power. Guard it well, for the fate of many rests in your hands." Jack stared at the hologram, trying to make sense of the words. "They were talking about you," he said, glancing at the girl. She nodded. "I am the last." The hologram continued. "Beware those who seek the fragment. They will stop at nothing to claim its power and reshape the galaxy in their image." The projection faded, leaving Jack and the girl alone in the dim light. Jack exhaled, running a hand through his hair. You're telling me scavengers want to use this power to take over the galaxy? The girl lowered her gaze. Yes, that's why they hunt me. Jack paced the chamber, processing everything. He had thought this was just another job, another rescue mission for a quick payday. But now he found himself at the center of something far bigger than he'd signed up for. He stopped and looked at the girl. All right, kid. If they want to reshape the galaxy, they'll have to go through me first. The girl smiled faintly, clutching the device closer to her chest. As they left the chamber, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Whatever power the girl held, it was waking up, and the galaxy was about to notice. The hidden power. Jack Carter's ship glided silently through the cold expanse of space, but inside the cockpit, the air felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. The alien girl sat across from him, her small hands resting on the mysterious device that had brought them to this point. The glow from her symbols had softened since they left the sanctuary moon, but Jack could still feel the quiet hum of power lingering in the cabin. Jack leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on the star chart displayed on the console. The path ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Whatever the girl was, and whatever she carried, the scavengers wouldn't stop hunting them. "You've been quiet since we left," Jack said, breaking the silence. "Not that I mind, but I figure you've got questions. Maybe even answers." The girl looked up, her glowing eyes meeting his. "I remember more now," she said softly. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? Like what?" She hesitated, as if unsure how much to reveal. "My people, we weren't warriors. We were guardians of knowledge, of balance." Her gaze drifted to the device. It wasn't meant to be a weapon. It's a key to awaken something that's been hidden for a long time. Jack shifted in his seat, his instincts tingling. Awaken what exactly? The girl's eyes darkened slightly. "A ship, a powerful one, built long ago by my ancestors. It's been sleeping beneath the surface of a forgotten world. The scavengers. They want it because they believe it can conquer entire systems." Jack let out a low whistle. "Great, so now we're sitting on a galactic doomsday switch." The girl shook her head. "It wasn't made for war. The ship was created to protect. But if it falls into the wrong hands, it could be twisted into something dangerous." Jack rubbed his temples, letting out a slow breath. "And you're telling me that ship is just waiting for you to wake it up?" She nodded. Jack stared at the device, the smooth metal surface reflecting the dim lights of the cabin. "Let me guess. The scavengers know where this ship is too." "They suspect," the girl replied. "But only I can activate it. That's why they chase us." Jack drummed his fingers on the control panel, lost in thought. "All right, kid. Let's say we find this ship before they do. What then? You fly off and save the galaxy." The girl tilted her head slightly. "I don't know how to fly," she admitted. Jack snorted. "Figures." A flicker on the radar pulled Jack's attention back to the console. A single blip appeared on the screen, trailing them from the edge of scanner range. Jack's jaw tightened. "Looks like we've got company again." The girl didn't react with fear. Instead, she placed her hand on the device, and for a moment, the symbols on her skin flared brighter. Jack noticed. "Hey, don't burn yourself out. You already pulled one magic trick. Let me handle this." But the girl shook her head. "They're not alone. More will follow." Jack's fingers hovered over the weapon controls, but deep down he knew she was right. A lone scavenger ship rarely acted alone. This was the first of many. "You're full of bad news, kid," Jack muttered. As if on cue, the comms crackled to life. "Carter," a voice sneered. "This is Captain Darris. We know you've got the girl. Let's not make this harder than it has to be. Hand her over, and you can walk away." Jack smirked, pressing the comms button. "You know me, Darris. I'm not really the surrendering type." Darris chuckled. "I figured you'd say that. No worries. We've got time. You can't run forever. Jack cut the transmission, pushing the thrusters to full speed. The girl watched him closely. "You're not afraid of them," she said quietly. Jack grinned. "I've dealt with scavengers my whole life. Bullies with fancy ships. They talk big, but when it comes down to it, they're just looking for easy targets. We're not easy." The girl's expression softened. For the first time, Jack thought he saw a flicker of trust in her glowing eyes. But that trust was cut short by the sudden flare of alarms. More ships appeared on the radar. 5, no, 6 now. A full scavenger fleet. Jack's smile faded. Okay, maybe they're a little more organized this time. The girl stood up, gripping the edge of the seat. "I can help," she said, her voice steady. Jack shook his head. "I told you." "You don't understand," she interrupted. "I don't just control the device. I can connect with your ship, make it faster, stronger. But it will drain me." Jack hesitated, staring at her. "You sure about this, kid?" She nodded. Jack sighed, cracking his knuckles. "All right, let's give them a show." The girl placed both hands on the control panel. The symbols on her arms blazed brighter than ever, and in response, the ship's lights flickered. Jack felt the sudden surge of power beneath his feet as the engines roared to life, louder than they had before. He grinned. Now that's more like it. With the scavenger ships closing in, Jack pushed the throttle forward. The ship shot through space like a comet, leaving a glowing trail in its wake. The chase had only just begun, but Jack could feel the difference. With the girl's power flowing through the ship, they weren't just running anymore. They were fighting back. The final stand. Jack's ship roared through the starfield, cutting sharp turns as scavenger vessels swarmed like vultures behind them. Bright streams of plasma fire streaked past the hull, shaking the entire frame. Every alarm blared, but Jack barely noticed. His focus was locked on the controls, pushing the ship harder than he ever had before. The alien girl stood at the center of the cabin, her small hands gripping the console as glowing symbols flickered across her arms. The device in her grasp hummed louder, syncing with the ship's systems. The thrusters pulsed brighter in response, sending them spiraling through space, faster than any standard craft had a right to go. "Brace yourself, kid," Jack shouted, tilting the ship hard to avoid an incoming barrage of missiles. One grazed their shields, sending sparks across the panels. The girl barely flinched, her glowing eyes fixed on the fleet closing in behind them. "They're gaining," she said softly. Jack gritted his teeth. "Yeah, I noticed. You got another miracle up your sleeve, or am I going to have to start improvising?" The girl pressed her hand flat against the control panel. A faint, melodic hum vibrated through the cabin, and the symbols on her arms burned even brighter. Jack felt the energy ripple through the ship. Suddenly, the radar screen flickered, distorting the shapes of the enemy ships. For a brief moment, the scavenger fleet appeared frozen, their targeting systems scrambled. Jack's eyes widened. "Well, that's new. They can't see us clearly now," the girl said, "but it won't last long." Jack didn't waste time asking how she did it. He yanked the controls, guiding the ship toward a barren moon that orbited a nearby gas giant. A thin atmosphere blanketed the surface, enough to hide them temporarily. As they descended, the girl's energy dimmed. She stumbled slightly, and Jack caught her before she fell. "Hey, easy now," Jack said, lowering her into the co-pilot's chair. "You're not a machine. Don't push yourself too hard." The girl's breathing slowed, but she gave him a faint nod. The ship touched down behind a jagged ridge of rock, settling quietly beneath the shadow of the towering cliffs. Jack powered down the engines and let out a long exhale. For now, they were hidden, but it wouldn't last. Jack leaned against the cabin wall, staring at the girl as she sat silently in the dim light. "They'll find us eventually. You know that, right?" She looked up, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. "Yes." Jack rubbed his hands together, pacing the small cabin. "All right, kid. I think it's time you told me exactly what that thing is." He gestured toward the device still clutched in her hands. The girl hesitated, tracing the patterns along its surface. "It's not just a key. It's a part of me. My people called it the heart of Lumira." Jack frowned. The heart of Lumira. Sounds important. "It was the core of our greatest creation," she said. "The Lumira, a starship unlike any other, built not for war, but for peace. A vessel designed to heal planets, reshape entire systems." Jack's brows furrowed. "Heal planets? You're telling me this thing can terraform worlds?" She nodded. "The Lumira was the last of its kind. My people used it to restore balance to worlds torn apart by conflict." But her voice trailed off, her gaze lowering. "But someone decided it would make a better weapon," Jack finished, crossing his arms. The girl's expression darkened. "Yes, the scavengers believe the Lumira can destroy as easily as it heals. They want to claim its power." Jack knelt beside her, his tone softer now. "And you? What do you want to do with it?" The girl met his eyes. "I want to finish what my people started. I want to protect the galaxy, even if I'm the last one left." Jack couldn't help but smile. "You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that." The ship's radar suddenly flickered to life. A red warning flashed across the screen. Multiple ships entering the moon's atmosphere. Jack's smile faded. "Looks like we're out of time." The girl stood slowly, her glowing eyes locking onto the radar. "They're here." Jack grabbed his rifle from the wall, slinging it over his shoulder. "I hope that fancy device of yours has one more trick left. Otherwise, this is going to get messy." The girl stepped forward, placing the heart of Lumira on the control panel. As soon as it touched the surface, the entire ship vibrated with energy. The walls of the cabin shimmered faintly, as if reacting to her presence. Jack's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "I'm calling it," she said calmly. "Calling what?" The girl's symbols burned brighter, illuminating the entire cabin. "The Lumira." Outside, the scavenger ships broke through the clouds, circling overhead like hawks. They began their descent, preparing to surround Jack's vessel. But something else stirred beneath the surface of the moon. The ground trembled, and deep fissures of light cracked across the rocky terrain. Jack shielded his eyes as a brilliant beam of energy erupted from the ground, piercing the sky. The scavenger ship swerved violently, blinded by the sudden light. And then, rising slowly from the depths of the moon, came the shape of a massive starship, sleek, ancient, and glowing with the same patterns that covered the girl's skin. Jack's jaw dropped. "You weren't kidding." The girl turned to Jack, her eyes brighter than ever. "Now we fight." The reward beyond dreams. The Lumira rose from the depths of the barren moon like a giant waking from centuries of slumber. Its massive hull shimmered in the pale light, etched with the same glowing patterns that danced across the alien girl's skin. Jagged rocks tumbled from its surface as the ship ascended, casting shadows across the moon's scared landscape. Jack Carter stood at the edge of the ridge, his eyes wide with disbelief. The scavenger ships circling overhead veered back, engines flaring as their pilots scrambled to make sense of what they were witnessing. "Kid," Jack muttered, glancing at the girl beside him. "You summoned a damned starship out of the ground." The girl's eyes glowed brightly, matching the pulsating core of the Lumira as it hovered above the surface. It was always here, waiting for the right moment. Jack shook his head in amazement. "You could have mentioned that sooner." The scavenger fleet didn't hesitate for long. One by one, their ships descended, weapons charging. Plasma cannons hummed as targeting arrays locked onto the Lumira. Jack's grin faded. "They're not backing off. You sure that thing can handle itself?" The girl stepped forward, lifting the glowing device, the heart of Lumira, into the air. Its patterns shifted, expanding into a series of intricate rings that floated around her. "It can," she said softly. "But I need to guide it." Before Jack could respond, the girl's body lifted gently from the ground, her feet hovering inches above the surface. Energy flowed from her palms, cascading into the ancient ship. The Lumira responded instantly, its outer panels rearranging, sleek and sharp, like armor plating being forged in real time. The scavenger leader's voice crackled over the comms. "Carter, this is your last chance. Hand over the girl and walk away." Jack smirked, lifting his rifle casually. "Yeah, Darius. I don't think that's happening." "You're outnumbered, Carter." Jack glanced at the Lumira, now brimming with power. "I wouldn't be so sure about that." As the scavengers opened fire, the Lumira's hull shimmered, absorbing the incoming blasts as if they were raindrops against glass. Then, with a low, resonant hum, the starship retaliated. A beam of pure energy lanced from its core, slicing through the lead scavenger ship like a knife through paper. The vessel detonated in a flash of blue light. Jack winced. "Damn. Remind me not to get on her bad side." The scavengers broke formation, but the Lumira was faster. Guided by the girl, it moved with impossible grace, weaving through the starfield like a predator stalking prey. One by one, the scavenger ships fell, until only Darius remained. His battered vessel spun wildly, engines sputtering as he tried to escape the moon's gravity. Jack activated the comms. "Hey, Darius. I'd run faster if I were you." Darius's voice trembled with panic. "This isn't over, Carter. You don't know what you're dealing with." Jack leaned back, smirking. "Maybe not, but I'm guessing you won't be sticking around to find out." With a flicker of thrusters, Darius's ship vanished into the void, leaving behind nothing but debris and silence. The Lumira slowly descended, settling gently on the moon's surface. The girl floated back down beside Jack, the light around her fading. Jack exhaled, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "So, that was something." The girl turned to him, her expression calm but weary. "It's over. For now." Jack watched the sky, half expecting more scavengers to appear. "You sure they won't come back?" She nodded. "They won't risk facing the Lumira again. Not after this." Jack rubbed the back of his neck, taking in the sight of the massive starship. "Well, kid, you've got yourself one hell of a ride. What happens now?" The girl hesitated, her gaze softening. "I was going to ask you the same thing." Jack chuckled. "Me? I'm just a scrappy mercenary with a beat-up ship. What do I know about saving galaxies?" The girl smiled faintly. "More than you think." Jack considered her words for a long moment, then sighed. "All right. Fine. But if I'm flying this thing, I get to pick the music." The girl's eyes sparkled with amusement. "Agreed." As the Lumira powered up, Jack stepped onto its ramp, feeling the ancient hum of its engines beneath his feet. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but something told him this was just the beginning of their journey. He glanced at the girl one last time. "What's your name, anyway?" She paused for a moment, then replied, "Lyra." Jack smiled. "Well, Lyra, let's go make some enemies." With that, the Lumira lifted off, disappearing into the stars. And somewhere, in the vast stretches of space, Jack Carter realized that the reward for saving an alien girl wasn't treasure or power. It was the chance to stand beside someone who could change the fate of the galaxy forever.